Tonight, $1,500 a fortnight to save every job that's on the line. The Prime Minister's new $130 billion stimulus package, the plan to keep 6 million people from the unemployment line during the shutdown. Three's a crowd, the new social distancing restrictions. Police and the army move on those not getting the message. An SOS from stranded Aussies as more overseas arrivals are holed up in hotels. Grim reality, New York Central Park transformed. America's death toll now exceeds 30,000. Seniors now in full lockdown, thinking outside the box to make life roll on. Petrol in Sydney at 84 cents a litre. The ACCC called in to investigate why the rest of the city is being overcharged. And the biggest names in music put on a show straight from their homes to yours.
Live from our Sydney headquarters, this is 7 News with Mark Ferguson.
Good evening. The Prime Minister has announced the biggest economic boost in Australian history. $130 billion paid to businesses to keep 6 million workers employed, even if there's no work. As first revealed by 7 News last night, employers will receive $1,500 a fortnight per employee for the next 6 months.
A massive problem requiring a massive solution.
Now is the time to dig deep.
The biggest package an Australian government has ever delivered.
We are committing $130 billion over the next 6 months.
Offering an economic lifeline to an estimated 6 million Australian workers, a JobKeeper allowance to be paid through businesses, $1,500 a fortnight for each worker they keep on their books, the same rate for all workers.
All in this together. That's what's fair. That's what's Australian.
Available to full-time, part-time, sole traders and casual workers who've been with their employer for a year or more, flowing from May 1, backdated to cover all those laid off from March 1st, with legal obligations for bosses to pass on the subsidies.
Extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures.
For those laid off, it'll be their primary income for the next 6 months. For others, the government hopes it will encourage bosses to re-employ those they've laid off and top up the incomes of those they can keep on.
To maintain that formal connection between the employer and the employee.
We want to keep the engine of our economy running through this crisis. It may run on idle for a time, but it must continue to run.
It brings the total of rescue packages to $320 billion. That's more than 6 times the Rudd government stimulus during the global financial crisis. It will require the Parliament to come back to pass legislation, and Labor says it won't stand in the way.
We will be constructive, but being constructive doesn't mean being silent.
Also, the partner income threshold for dole payments has been increased from $48,000 to almost $80,000, allowing access to thousands more recently unemployed, part of a package of a magnitude no government has ever contemplated before.
And I hope and pray they never have to again.
And let's go to Mark Riley now in Canberra. Mark, you broke this story last night. It's a lot of money. Will it be enough to save those millions of jobs?
Well, it should be, Mark. It's available to all businesses, big and small, whose revenues fall by 30%. And I'm told the ATO is already seeing a rush of 8,000 businesses signing up online this afternoon. I'm also told that Attorney General Christian Porter is working on a raft of industrial laws to ensure bosses don't take these payments and then sack workers when it's all over. A mutual obligation guarantee, if you like, to do the right thing. And by saving hundreds of thousands of workers from those jobless queues, we'll also do another thing. It'll prevent our official unemployment rate from skyrocketing to 20 or 25% or even higher. Mark?
Incredible. Mark Riley in Canberra. Thank you. Tough social distancing restrictions starting at midnight are squarely aimed at young adults who've been ignoring advice, with police now given the power to stamp out gatherings of more than 2 people. New South Wales has more than 1,900 cases tonight, but the latest jump of 127 is smaller than previous days. Nationally, 18 lives have been lost. Australian travellers arriving home ill have now been assigned to their own high care hotel.
It's no ordinary front reception. Doctors, nurses, gowns and masks. The hotel turned hospital, where in-house guests are replaced by inpatient admissions.
What was your response when you first got told that news? grateful for it. I had no idea. All I had was a headache.
That is Marty McCarthy, who flew in from America on Saturday showing symptoms.
Unfortunately, last night I did test positive for COVID-19. It wasn't a huge shock.
He is one of 40 isolated in this special designation hotel.
Welcome to my quarantine hotel in Sydney.
Room service here, a visit every 2 hours from a medical team.
It's got your traditional hospital sheets, those kind of plasticky feeling things.
He's taken the bed base and created a wall for an apartment feel, the fridge full of supplies.
I know some people have had problems with it, calling conditions similar to being in prison, which I think is a bit of an overreaction.
All part of the new reality in a locked-down Australia.
This is radical.
The social distancing rules tightened again overnight, and even Bondi was responding today. Now, just 2 people maximum can gather socially in public or at home, excepting those who live in the house.
Don't gather together in groups. That's the simple way of putting it.
The strongest recommendations, though, for those over 70 to remain at home. Playgrounds closed. The new laws, effective midnight tonight, inching to total lockdown.
You cannot be out of the house unless it's for a specific purpose.
There are 6 acceptable reasons to leave home: medical and compassion visits, exercise, work, education and shopping for essentials.
You should be going for just stuff you need and do it and get home. It's not a time for browsing.
The penalty for breaches, on the spot $1,000 fines, and this time no grace period.
So they're not mucking around.
What we need to do is not just flatten this out. I mean, we need to beat this.
How long for?
They will assess the current restrictions we've put in place after a month.
Today's statewide numbers perhaps show it's working. The 3rd day running, the daily increase fell.
Whilst pleased, we need to be cautious, and it is the long-term trend in that data that's going to be important.
But one possible motive for those unprecedented restrictions, the Premier admitting today medical supplies, masks, gowns are an issue.
The supply routes that we'd relied on have dried up.
And Chris Reason joins me now. Chris, the Premier's last comments there on medical supplies are a real worry.
They are indeed, Mark. Good evening to you. Doctors and nurses have been warning for months about a critical shortage in PPE, personal protective equipment, masks, gowns, sanitisers and the like. The federal government said today that they have received a shipment of several million masks from overseas. Nothing about the other essentials, though, with Gladys Berejiklian and the Premier conceding that there is a worldwide supply problem right now. Another quick heads up from the Premier too, Mark, a warning for parents that once Easter holidays are finished, she's saying that they might not be encouraging students to go back to school. They probably want them to continue learning right there at home. Mark.
The long haul. Chris Reason, thank you. Now, in a shocking case of breaking the self-isolation rules, a man who flew into Sydney from the Middle East has been arrested on the streets of Pagewood, in the city and at Camperdown. Each time he was given bail until today. The Police Commissioner warning he's done with cautions.
When Matthew Steffen touched down in Sydney, he was warned to self-isolate, but police say he repeatedly ignored strict coronavirus rules.
I'm horrified to see that today we have somebody who was warned not once but 4 times.
After flying in from Jordan on March 18, Steffen was told to stay at home. At 1:20 last Saturday morning, he was found wandering Banksia Street, Pagewood, and fined $1,000. That evening, he was found in Pitt Street in the city. He was given bail again to self-isolate in apartments at Camperdown, but was then seen trying to escape. He was arrested again and taken to a police station, with bail finally refused. The 30-year-old was today moved from police cells to hospital.
My client suffers from a number of mental health conditions that will be addressed.
I'm pretty done with cautions, to be honest.
During a patrol through the city overnight, police found a group of 10 men drinking and playing poker inside this Japanese restaurant. Most of the customers managed to take off, but 2 of the men were fined $1,000 each, and the owner has to cough up $5,000. At this camping ground at Waverton, a 15-year-old boy allegedly coughed at a council ranger. He'll face court in June. And in Melbourne, this couple celebrated their big day with no regard for the 5-person limit. Reckless behaviour that has the potential to harm others. Natasha Squarey, 7 News.
An extra 30,000 Australian businesses are set to get a boost from a new banking package. They're being offered a break on repayments for loans of up to $10 million. Very sweet relief for many struggling just to pay the rent.
At the Sweet Belém, they make one of the world's best-known treats, Portuguese tarts. Even in a COVID crisis, people are tempted.
We're still definitely selling because people can't resist them.
They can sell up to 3,000 a day. Right now, barely 200.
My biggest concern is, being able to pay rent and stay afloat.
Business staying afloat any way possible. Newsagent Kim Tan is even selling face masks. She will need help.
Bank, government, landlord, we all have to work together.
The same appeal for cooperation made by the Prime Minister. Today, the banks responded.
To be very clear, where landlords do the right thing by their tenants, their bank will do the right thing by them.
With small business struggling to pay rent, the package assists landlords by extending a 6-month deferral of repayment on loans from $3 million to now $10 million, covering 98% of business loans. To qualify, landlords will need to agree not to evict tenants.
So we're getting the building blocks of a survival package in place. What we need now is more support from governments.
Like tax relief, particularly easing the burden of land tax. Property groups maintain commercial landlords don't need to be persuaded that it's in no one's interest to toss out small business, leave empty spaces with no one able to fill it, when so many are battling to hang on.
To keep the morale of the people so they can have a treat.
Until this passes. Chris Mark, 7 News.
The Australian share market certainly like the government's and banks' commitments to keep businesses afloat. Network Finance editor Gemma Acton joins me now. Gemma, the market has enjoyed its best day in many years.
Yes, Mark, its best day in 40 years, no less. After a choppy start, the ASX 200 climbed steadily higher until the final minutes of trade when it jumped sharply, eventually closing up 7%. This last-minute boost was indeed thanks to the government unveiling its new $130 billion stimulus, including those all-important wage subsidies. Healthcare companies were today's star performers, while the major banks all notched up gains of more than 7%.
OK, Gemma, thank you. Regulations on hand sanitiser production have been loosened to make sure there's plenty to go around to limit the virus infection rate. The Therapeutic Goods Administration has given the green light for many businesses to mass produce and sell sanitisers with food-grade alcohol. The only stipulation, they must stick to one of 2 recipes developed by the World Health Organisation. There have been alarming developments in the Ruby Princess cruise ship debacle. 3 infected crew members have now been brought to shore for urgent care, as the widower of a passenger who died speaks of his fury.
Under the cover of darkness and under police guard, the latest victims of the Ruby Princess scandal, 3 crew members taken to hospital last night, transferred ashore by police launch. They were suffering acute respiratory symptoms, according to the company. Carla Lake wasn't so lucky. On the cruise with her husband Graham to celebrate her 75th birthday, she died yesterday morning from coronavirus.
Just to watch your partner pass away, just the noises, the breathing and that for 12 hours.
Graham was speaking from the Caboolture Hospital where his wife passed away. He's furious at the cruise ship company.
We got it from the cruise ship and I'm very disappointed with the cruise. None of us believed there was any sickness on that ship, whatever. Well, all they wanted to do was get us off that ship.
As the alarming numbers continue to grow from the Ruby Princess, it's the untold story that is just as concerning. There were more than 500 tourists from America who were simply allowed to go home, and more than 460 from the rest of the world, and we have no idea how many of them have caught and spread coronavirus. Now 7 News can reveal another Ruby Princess cover-up. It's understood the ship came within 2 nautical miles of the Botany coast late on Friday night without a pilot on board, in breach of state law.
What we've seen is error after error in relation to this vessel.
Evan Batten, 7 News.
1,200 more overseas travellers have arrived at Sydney Airport, welcomed not by family and friends but police and soldiers. They're being put up in hotels where rooms normally cost hundreds of dollars a night, and there's little sympathy for those complaining about the conditions.
Behind two barricades, Mohammed Iftikhar waited 45 minutes to welcome back his sister and nephew from Pakistan. All he got was a few seconds. In an instant, they were on the bus. Mohammed won't see them for 2 weeks.
It's a very tough moment for us also.
Another man desperate to glimpse his wife before being taken to Outbreak Hotel wasn't allowed to hand her a bunch of flowers. Airport staff instead making the delivery for him. Beth Russell looked for a familiar face among dozens of police, army and border force officers.
It's strange to come back like this and not see friends and family.
The novelty of a hotel room for 2 weeks is enticing for some.
I was hoping for a romance, but they're not going to let us out of our rooms.
Even if the hotels are nice, it's only taken a few hours for the realities of complete isolation to set in. Some are coping far better than others.
Here I am, in this God-forsaking hotel. I need to be in hospital.
Lara Worthington's mother, Sharon Bingle, fears she has coronavirus and says her Newtown hotel is substandard. Daughter Lara thinks so too, but her tweet drew a huge backlash.
Where the bloody hell are my privileges?
Tom Saker, 7 News.
The US President has backed down on plans to reopen America by Easter, today extending social restrictions through April as the country braces for its virus toll to peak. Donald Trump's leading immunologist revealing a grim new prediction that as many as 200,000 Americans could die.
The grim reality of New York's virus outbreak.
They're putting bodies in the back of a freezer truck, y'all. Please stay inside.
More than 200 people died in one day. A nurse sharing this of victims taken away as the fight spreads to Central Park, part of the famous landmark turned over to a field hospital to treat COVID-19.
The sickest patients, the ones that are intubated or have a breathing tube down, that kind of thing, can be cared for here.
The warning of what's to come, worse.
Looking at what we're seeing now, I would say between 100 and 200,000 cases, deaths. I mean, we're going to have millions of cases.
Donald Trump's hopes of back to normal by Easter dashed.
The peak in death rate is likely to hit in 2 weeks.
Social distancing guidelines will now last at least another month.
Nothing would be worse than declaring victory before the victory is won.
The strain of the virus outbreak is showing in other ways. New York's 911 emergency operators are now getting a record number of calls, while the New York Police Department is trying to deal with having 12% of its workforce off sick. More than 600 officers have tested positive for COVID-19. At least 3 members of the department have died. The Commander-in-Chief aware his virus briefings have a captive audience.
The ratings are like Monday Night Football ratings, and that these are like Bachelor finale.
In New York, Paul Kadak, 7 News.
There are fears of looming social unrest in some European countries. Many families in lockdown are now becoming desperate, and police are moving in as restrictions are defied.
Police and troops across Europe are on a new mission, enforcing rules stopping virus violations. In Germany, crews stormed a shisha bar after neighbours reported a party. 22 people barricaded themselves inside for an act that weeks ago wasn't a crime. Despite having a high number of COVID cases, Germany's death toll is low, so the country is treating patients from Italy and France. Spain received health supplies from the Czech Republic. Northern Italy has experienced most of the country's almost 10,800 deaths, but in the south, where Sunday Mass was held on a rooftop, they're struggling too. After 3 weeks in lockdown, some families say they can't afford food.
Mia figlia sta mangiando questo pezzo di pane con la Nutella. Se, come mia figlia, altri bambini fra qualche giorno non riescono a mangiare sto pezzo di pane.
Threatening a revolution, prompting armed police to be stationed outside supermarkets. Here in the UK, lockdown measures will be reviewed every 3 weeks. Over time, restrictions will be gradually lifted, but life is unlikely to be normal for at least the next 6 months.
And it is plausible that it could go further than that. We just need to wait to see how successful we've been.
An outcome entirely up to the people.
This is a police message.
You must stay indoors. This is serious. We need to beat Corona, and we can only do that if we work together.
In London, Sarah Greenhalgh, 7 News.
Closer to home, massive efforts are underway to ensure our most vulnerable are getting the necessities of life as they're told not to leave home. Everyone over 70 and those over 60 with a chronic illness are facing a winter hibernation. Government agencies, charities and retailers are now all working to ensure no one goes without.
At a time when so many are thinking outside of the box, this Box of Basics production line is gearing up to bring the supermarket to people's homes.
It has a whole lot of basic household essentials, both food and hygiene products, and of course 8 rolls of toilet paper.
Woolworths is teaming up with DHL to package and Australia Post to deliver these boxes, costing $80 each.
Australia Post is incredibly proud to work with Woolworths and deliver through this really important time.
Online demand has soared. Australia Post orders are up 17% and climbing fast. There are several delivery services like this ramping up across the country. There are 2.5 million Australians over the age of 70. There are 200,000 living in aged care facilities, which means there are millions who are needing to find new ways to get access to the necessities we take for granted. And not just necessities like food, many seniors in aged care are now denied access to friends and family. Presbyterian Aged Care is the latest to ban all visitors as the midnight curfew falls on Australians aged 70 and older.
It scares you a little bit, you know, this being locked in or locked down.
Across the country, concern is rising over the impact of isolation on our most vulnerable.
It's difficult, but it's not impossible, and it's what has to be done.
These boxes are being delivered to 150,000 homes across New South Wales, the ACT and Victoria, with the rest of the country to be included within days. Brian Seymour, 7 News.
Petrol prices have fallen below 90 cents a litre in parts of Sydney after the crisis caused demand for fuel to plummet. Power fuel in Granville was 91 cents today after falling to a very low 83.9 cents overnight. ACCC Chairman Rod Sims today called on Sydney service stations to drop their prices below $1.20 a litre. He indicated world current oil prices would mean that is a fair price. We'll have more COVID-19 developments very soon. The latest will have any updates from 7 o'clock, and I'll bring you a special bulletin just after 9:30. But time now for a check on our weather with David Brown.
Yeah, thanks very much, Fergo. Well, it's fine across the Sydney Basin as we go to air. We had some sunny breaks earlier today. Fog patches are likely in our west first thing tomorrow. Now, temperature-wise, there was only a small variation in maxima across the metro area. You'll notice less than 1 degree separated Penrith and the city. But later this week, a substantial rainfall event opens up across large parts of our state, especially west of the Great Dividing Range. And of course, that's great news for our farmers. But right now, we've got clear skies across Sydney and it's 24 degrees just about everywhere. Local forecasts in detail, top of the hour, Fergo.
See you then, David. Thank you. Doctors are being forced to get creative as many patients are confined to their homes. Next, healthcare without leaving your house. We'll show you the simple steps. Plus, nurses out of work, the push to get them back on the front line, why they say the government must act now. Flight disaster, a deadly mid-air explosion, medical staff and a patient lost. Security smackdown, hear Donald Trump's message to Harry and Meghan. And later in sport, the clubs accept a deal to save rugby league, but what's stopping the players? Welcome back. Tactical police have locked down a street in the inner west to raid a property this afternoon. The heavily armed officers searched the block on Stanmore Road in Enmore around 2:45. Mobile phone video shows one person being arrested.
Is there any other occupants inside? Number Stanmore Road, Enmore, it is time to leave now.
Detectives, the dog squad and a Bearcat armoured vehicle were called in during the operation. Last-ditch negotiations are continuing to save the jobs of potentially thousands of nurses working in private hospitals across the state. Their future has been thrown into limbo after the federal government announced it would ban all non-urgent elective surgery from Wednesday.
Already we've seen so many nurses from the private sector stood down or sent on leave.
The state government says it wants to work on a solution. With the prospect of transmission of COVID-19 to health professionals a constant concern, there's a move to ensure a doctor's appointment isn't also when the virus can be passed on. A new telehealth consultation service will improve access to health care and help keep our GPs and their patients safe.
Face-to-face care without face-to-face contact.
Good morning. Hi, doctor. Yeah, how are you?
Lena Minaway seeks pregnancy advice from her home in Oatley.
How long have you been trying for now?
While her doctor consults from the safety of his GP clinic in Burwood.
Maybe it's time to explore the possibility of IVF.
From today, all Australians can use telehealth services just like this, protecting health professionals and patients from coronavirus.
If we can manage to get the information from the patient and give them the advice that they need, obviously that's the best for everyone.
It follows the federal government's expansion of Medicare rebates to bulk build telehealth consultations. In recent weeks, this clinic's business had halved from 400 to 200 patients a day.
Anxiety is going to start coming out now with all of this social isolation, and it's important that Australia knows that their doctor is only a phone call away.
There are several telehealth options using your phone or a video platform such as Skype or Zoom. Smartwatches will also help you provide important information like your heart rate to your doctor. But where physical examination is still required, clinics will remain open. And soon the first virtual hospital will be trialled in Armidale in the state's far north. COVID-19 patients to be given sophisticated machines to monitor their vital signs from home. Alex Hart, 7 News.
A Medivac flight has caught fire and exploded on takeoff in the Philippines, killing all 8 people on board. The plane was headed for Tokyo with medical staff, a patient and a companion. Flames and thick smoke filled the sky. It's unclear yet how the fire on board started. Harry and Meghan have hit back at Donald Trump, saying they have no intention of asking the US to foot their security bill. Earlier, the president had tweeted that while he's a great admirer of the Queen, the US will not pay for the couple's protection now that they've reportedly moved to Los Angeles. The Sussexes said they've organised their own security detail. They're due to formally step down as senior royals in days. Sydney scientists have discovered a new tool in the fight against the virus. Up next, clear diagnosis in quick time, identifying the symptoms and stopping the spread. Plus, border assault, a driver accused of coughing on police. What else she's been charged with? Later, stories of survival, the worldwide trend providing hope in the heartbreak. We break down the numbers. And an old concept gets a new twist, how pen pals are making a comeback in this new world of isolation. Welcome back. A man hit in the head with a guitar during a home invasion at Gladesville last Monday has now died. The 36-year-old was asleep in his Wharf Road unit when he and his partner woke to find a man standing next to their bed. A 35-year-old was arrested in Byron Bay last night. He's now been charged with murder. A Queanbeyan woman has appeared in court in South Australia accused of coughing on police following a wild chase at a border checkpoint. Officers say the 52-year-old mother of 5 had 2 knives in her car and a carton of beer. She was refused bail, the prosecutor saying she's been uncooperative and aggressive since her arrest. With regular flights grounded, the Prime Minister is being sent more videos from stranded Australians appealing for charter flights to get them home. Their messages show they're becoming more desperate and fearful as they run out of time and money.
From 12,000 kilometres away, a very Australian SOS.
Please stop Morrison, bring us home.
Nearly 150 Aussies stuck on board the Ocean Atlantic ship in Montevideo, running out of hope.
Our situation here is very precarious.
They had chartered a flight home by splitting costs with passengers from Chinese-built ship the Greg Mortimer, but
the MV Greg Mortimer has now been denied entry to Montevideo.
Tickets doubling to 10,000 Australian dollars, prompting appeals to Canberra.
I'm asking you, please, to pick up the difference in the cost of this flight, this private charter flight.
Late today, Minister for Foreign Affairs Maurice Payne told 7 News the government will ensure the passengers are reimbursed for this price rise. Nearby in Chile, dozens of Australians wait to board the last commercial flight out. Economy tickets, $5,200.
It's been
really stressful. I'm pregnant as well, so it's just turned into such a fiasco.
Like hundreds of Australians, Jason is in lockdown in Peru.
We're very concerned that we're not seeing enough urgency from the Australian government and DFAT to help get us out of here.
From all four corners of the globe, the message is the same.
Please, Scott Morrison, bring us home.
Taylor Auerbach, 7 News.
Scientists here in Sydney have developed a world-first coronavirus diagnostic tool that could save thousands of lives. The online program called COVID is aimed at training healthcare workers to identify the virus quickly and correctly.
Sydney scientists adding a new weapon to the arsenal in the fight against COVID-19, a world-first tool that will ramp up detection of the deadly virus.
The idea is to train clinicians and other healthcare workers to recognise how COVID-19 looks on a CT of the chest.
Called COVID, the educational tool is already used to teach clinicians how to identify the stages of breast cancer in CT scans. Now, using scans from patients across the globe, including Italy, it's helping healthcare workers diagnose the virus in its very early stages. Also identifying the severity of the case and how quickly it might progress.
And that allows a much more rapid triaging of patients.
The platform is now being made available to health and medical facilities across the globe for free. But the minds behind the tool stress it isn't meant to replace existing testing methods.
It's not a competitor, it's part of the armoury that hospitals have to try and diagnose these patients.
New TGA-approved 15-minute blood tests are now on their way down under from China.
The test is pretty accurate, but it works best once symptoms are developed.
It's expected they could be available as early as next week. Amber Laidler, 7 News.
Many have faced real adversity before, and now during this crisis, our elderly are being offered support with an old-fashioned twist. They're making new friends via the power of the pen.
A letter from a stranger.
We hope you are keeping well and spirits high during this time.
Sometimes it can be an introduction to a lifelong friend. These pen pal letters are being sent to nursing homes across Sydney.
Anyone can join, any age. All you need to do is write a letter, a drawing of your little child.
To really striking a chord within the community, they do want to reach out, particularly with the seniors. They're vulnerable at the best of times.
So what are your plans for the weekend?
Having someone on the outside check in is a lifeline for those with special needs like Nathan McKibben.
Just knowing that people are there for me, and if I've got any concerns I can always talk to them.
If they remain isolated without any emotional connection, their health will deteriorate very rapidly.
Hi, Gran.
G'day, Maxie. How are you?
Grandmas and grandpas jumping online to engage with their favourite little people.
I miss you soon.
I miss you too.
Technology will never replace the magic of tangible time spent together, and many of us are missing that real connection.
Happy birthday.
But there's comfort in finding temporary solutions like how to celebrate Nan's 101st birthday, separate but never alone. Jessica Ridley, 7 News.
Yeah, happy birthday, Nan. There's a different type of panic buying going on across Sydney, and it's not what you'd think. Details next. Plus, from wine destination to virus hotbed, new rules in the Barossa Valley. In it together, Elton John leads the way, putting on a concert from behind closed doors.
A few passing showers today, fog tomorrow. Details soon.
Recapping finance news now, and after a rocky start, the ASX 200 ended 7% up, the best session in 40 years. Woolworths firmed up more than 9.5%. Sydney Airport slid almost 2%. And on the currency market, our dollar's buying 61.45 US cents. As we heard earlier, regular unleaded is falling, selling for just 87.9 cents a litre at Fairfield and Villawood. The average price is still around $1.27 a litre. The ban on auction crowds and open houses due to the pandemic led to a much quieter property market over the weekend. Around 40% of auctions were withdrawn as real estate agents were forced to switch to online selling. The new rules also saw Sydney's preliminary clearance rate drop to 47%. One of the country's most famous wine regions has become a hotbed for the virus. The Barossa Valley has gone into effective lockdown in a bid to stamp out a cluster linked to tourist groups. Schools are closed, non-essential travel is banned, and a new health clinic will open soon. But wine production will continue, the government saying it doesn't want to interrupt the grape harvest. There are 34 confirmed cases in the region. Lady Gaga, Dave Grohl and Billie Eilish are among the stars who performed in a US fundraiser for charities on the pandemic frontline. Millions tuned in to the Living Room concert where viewers were urged to stay right at home.
That once we get through these tough times, better days lie ahead. And since we're all hunkered down together, until those days greet us again, we thought that we'd put on a little show for you.
The hour-long show raised funding for food banks and the families of first responders. First it was toilet paper, then rice and pasta. Now cats and dogs are being cleared off the shelves. The RSPCA has seen a significant increase in the number of animals being adopted, with many people wanting a true companion during this time of isolation.
At the RSPCA, there's been an adoption rush. Rows of dog kennels stripped bare, a rare sight.
People are turning towards animals in their time of isolation.
I've been put off for work, so this is the guy to keep me entertained for a while.
Triple the usual demand, they've had to control crowds. You can now only adopt by appointment.
We just want to make sure, consistent with what we always do, is that people understand what they're getting themselves into.
Isolation motivating many.
It's the opportunity of everyone being at home at the moment. It's to spend some quality time with a little kitten.
I think there's so much going on in our world today, and we just want a little bit of happiness, just to bring a little bit of joy into our lives.
A pair of puppies welcomed into this pack.
We never laughed so much.
The emotional and mental toll of home isolation, a major concern in the months to come, with pets proven to offer important therapy. What do you reckon?
On the flip side, pet hotels are stepping up to help health workers now too busy to be home enough.
So we are dealing with a few hospitals at the moment.
Pets are relishing in their reunion with humans. Serena Andaloro, 7 News.
As the virus spreads across the globe, so too does the panic. But although the headlines are often tragic, there is real hope in some numbers. Coming up, just how many are taking on the illness and winning? We look at the stories of survival. Don't miss that soon on 7 News. But now Mel is here with sport. Hi there, Mel. Not everyone convinced by the NRL's plan to save the game.
Yes, Fergo, it is an extremely complicated situation, and so far it seems the clubs are on board, but not necessarily the Players Association yet. As players vent their frustrations with head office, many asking where has all the money gone? More details up next. And the brutal reality of rugby's fight for survival, Raylene Castle tells us if they'll still be there in a few months. Welcome back. Clubs have accepted the first phase of the NRL's plan to save the game, but the Players Association is proving a tougher nut to crack. Facing a pay cut of around 80% due to the pandemic, players are demanding the NRL open up the books so they can see where billions of dollars in broadcast funding has gone.
The NRL told clubs in a phone hookup this morning they'll each receive $2.5 million to keep them afloat for now.
The CEOs were very happy. We're a rugby league family, and when someone goes down, we're there to support them, and that's exactly what we did with the clubs.
To find the $40 million needed, ARLC Chairman Peter V'landys committed to savage cuts at head office. Operating costs will be slashed by more than a half, executive salaries by 25%, and just the bare minimum of staff will remain employed when the NRL shuts down. The one-off payment of $2.5 million will have to last the clubs until the competition resumes again, something V'landys is hopeful could happen as early as July 1.
We were playing when the infection rate was reasonably low. So if it gets back to that again, there's no reason why we can't.
But the situation with player pay cuts remains unresolved. The NRL has offered nearly $25 million, with more than $5 million coming from the liquidation of an injury hardship fund. The players are fuming and want the right to audit the NRL's finances to see where billions of dollars in broadcast money has gone.
You've got to
make sure you prioritise, honesty and transparency. The players have sacrificed a significant amount to ensure that the clubs stay alive.
We'll certainly be a lot more transparent.
Michelle Bishop, 7 News.
Well, Raylene Castle says rugby will survive as a professional sport, but the code's dire financial trouble was revealed today. The Rugby Australia CEO held a web conference after an AGM where full financial results were not available, but started with a $9.4 million deficit. Castle says there's enough cash to survive the next 3 months in lockdown, but jobs will be slashed.
This is difficult times. This is difficult times for all staff within our business. This is difficult times for players, and I have an enormous amount of sympathy for that.
Angry players who say they've been left in the dark will be presented with drastic pay cuts tomorrow. Our Olympic and Paralympic athletes are embracing the challenge of life in lockdown and the delayed Tokyo Games. And they're united with a message for all Australians: stay home, fight through this together, and let them lead the way.
All around Australia, our athletes are getting on with it any way they can.
Hi, I'm Ellen Hardy and I'm a Paralympian. Today we're doing a home workout.
Social media personal training, garages became gyms of all shapes and sizes, even a dam-turned swimming pool on teenage Paralympic prospect Cole Pearce's family dairy farm. Sportsmen and women, experts in resilience, adapting to challenges and living on shoestring budgets, with guidance for all of us on life in lockdown.
Work hard for goals, even if it means making sacrifices, and I think that's what everyone's going to have to do now.
It's really important to have a routine each day, staying focused, getting tasks done.
Keep it simple, take small steps and set goals.
To stay really mentally and physically fit and do what we can and control what we can control.
And from a couple of sporting supermums, always involve the family.
Didn't they say never work with children and animals? And I seem to have both.
Eliza Oldconnell knows about overcoming setbacks. She survived meningococcal at 16, and this crisis is really close to home.
My husband Kieran is actually a radiographer, and he has already scanned a couple of patients with coronavirus. We're staying home. We're simply not going out. It's not worth risking our health, and it's not worth risking the health of others around us.
A 2004 Paralympian before stopping to raise her family. Eliza was headed for her second Games 16 years later. Another year's wait won't hurt.
The world is in crisis, and it's a sporting event at the end of the day, and people's health comes first.
By 2021, they'll really be ready. Matt Carmichael, 7 News.
More incredible resilience and persistence and strength, and more inspiration for us, I say.
Yeah, motivating themselves while motivating the rest of us.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Good on you, Mel. Thank you. The death toll from COVID-19 is rising across the globe, but there is another welcome statistic outpacing it. The number of people who've beaten the virus is soaring. Among them, some truly incredible stories of survival. Seven's Melissa Doyle explains.
Every day it seems we're bombarded with headlines like these. World economies on the verge of collapse, new restrictions on how we live our lives, and the latest death toll as coronavirus sweeps the globe. But among the growing chaos, there's another more optimistic figure which is quietly growing too. The number of people who have taken on COVID-19 and won. It's no secret the elderly are some of the most at risk. A study conducted at the epicentre of the outbreak in China found almost 15% of patients over 80 died. Compare that to those in their 20s, where the mortality rate was just 0.2%. That makes the survival of Italica Grondona even more remarkable. The 102-year-old great-grandmother came down with COVID-19 in northern Italy earlier this month. And despite all the odds, she's now recovered and doing well. Doctors have even given her a nickname: Highlander the Immortal. She is just one of more than 150,000 people across the world who have beaten the virus. And experts say, in reality, that number is almost certainly much higher. We just haven't tested enough people yet. In Australia, more than 240 have now recovered after testing positive. And while we currently have nearly 4,000 patients undergoing treatment, right now the odds are in their favour.
Good on you, Mel. David is back now with the latest on our weather. Brownie, that rain was light and patchy today.
Yes, indeed, Fergo, but a more substantial rain event is building. Your forecast straight after the break.
Tonight on the latest from 7 News, keeping Australia in business, the Treasurer joins us on his $130 billion boost for workers.
The coronavirus castaways, we put stranded Australians' pleas directly to the Foreign Minister.
And the scientist who has the key to speeding up a COVID-19 breakthrough.
That's all coming up on the latest from 7 News.
Tonight's 7 News headlines: the federal government's $130 billion stimulus package, giving businesses $1,500 a fortnight per employee to keep people on the job. A Sydney hotel is now a COVID-19 hospital for passengers returning home and testing positive. Seniors are now in full lockdown, with efforts underway to keep them in with essentials and stay connected with loved ones. And the consumer watchdog is calling for all Sydney service stations to drop their petrol prices, as some fall below 90 cents a litre, driven down by the crisis. Now, with the very latest on Sydney's weather, here's David.
Thanks very much, Fergo. A little rain today. It's fine right now. Early fog is in the wind tomorrow. Now, today's temperature range from 19.5 degrees near sunrise to a top of 24.9 by mid-afternoon. And once again, yes, there was only a small variation in maxima, and all reported rainfall totals less than 1 millimetre since 9 o'clock this morning. A patchy rain band with embedded thunderstorms is gradually contracting to the northeast corner of our state this evening. We've had some good falls today, 30 millimetres plus to the north of us. Now, the bulk of the wet weather is forecast to clear out to sea. We can see that from our forecast model, but some lingering instability associated with the trough is expected to trigger some isolated showers during the second half of your Tuesday. But another surge of showery weather is lining up our state. Later in the week, as pressure falls across the interior, scattered showers and thunderstorms moving through, leading to rainfall totals like this. Yes, it's good news for our farmers. Interstate tomorrow, fine, mostly sunny conditions in Melbourne at around 22 degrees. For Brisbane, a few showers are passing through and a top of 31. Back home, we'll see some morning fog patches in the east and some isolated showers just popping up in the afternoon. The odd thunderstorm is possible also during the afternoon just near the Queensland border. Now, for us, some early fog patches are on the way for western parts of Sydney. Then a fine and partly cloudy day to follow, with maximum temperatures generally reaching the mid-20s inland. Slight seas continue over our coastal waters. Winds out of the southeast, not much in it at all. In fact, 10 knots at best. For the city, fine, partly cloudy. Forecast maximum 23 degrees, coming off an overnight low there of around 18. Let's go to the outlook. Wednesday, cloudy with temperatures generally around the mid-20s and generally fine. Thursday, different story. Rain and local thunderstorms starting to develop. And as for Friday, yes, more wet weather is on the way. The weekend, well, that's looking fine. That's the latest weather. Fergo.
Good on you, David. Thank you. That is 7 News for this Monday. The latest is next, and I'll be back with a special bulletin just after 9:30. I'm Mark Ferguson from all the team. I hope you have a good night.